In the annals of American history, there exists a chapter stained with unspeakable atrocities and heart-wrenching brutality. It is a chapter that often remains untold, overshadowed by the weight of collective guilt and shame. Today, we dare to shed light on a harrowing reality: the lynching of Black pregnant women. This video aims to expose this dark facet of America's past, invoking empathy and igniting a passionate call for justice and remembrance. Unveiling the Shadows. In the murky depths of racial prejudice and oppression, Black pregnant women suffered the cruelest of fates. Their bodies, carrying the promise of new life, became targets of unbridled hatred and terror. Lynching, an abomination rooted in racism, tore through their lives, leaving scars on their souls and haunting our nation's conscience. What is lynching? Lynching refers to the act of extrajudicial violence or execution carried out by a mob, typically without legal authority or due process. Historically, lynching in the United States was primarily targeted against African Americans, but it also targeted other marginalized groups, such as Native Americans, Asian Americans, and Mexican Americans. Lynching occurred mainly from the late 19th century to the mid-20th century, particularly during the era of racial segregation and the Jim Crow laws. Lynchings were often characterized by extreme brutality, torture, and public spectacle. Victims were typically accused of crimes or perceived transgressions, although many lynchings were based on false accusations, racial prejudice, or the desire to maintain white supremacy. The mobs responsible for lynchings often operated outside the boundaries of the law, taking matters into their own hands and ignoring the principles of justice and fairness. Lynchings were not confined to a specific method, and they could involve various forms of violence. Hanging was a commonly used method, but victims were also subjected to beatings, shootings, burnings, and other forms of torture and mutilation. These acts of violence were intended to terrorize and oppress minority communities, instilling fear and maintaining a system of racial control and domination. How were Black pregnant women lynched? Imagine the unimaginable, the anguish of a mother-to-be, her hopes and dreams crushed by a society that deemed her life expendable. Lynching robbed these women of the most fundamental rights: the right to life, to motherhood, and to dignity. It was a grotesque display of power, a repudiation of our shared humanity. The specific methods varied depending on the circumstances and the particular mob carrying out the lynching. While it is distressing to discuss these details, it is crucial to acknowledge the brutal reality of these acts. Some common aspects of the lynching of Black pregnant women include hanging. Lynching victims were often hanged by a rope or other means, usually from a tree or other elevated structures. This method caused immense suffering and resulted in death by strangulation. Beating and torture. Lynching frequently involved the victims being subjected to severe beatings and torture. Pregnant women would endure physical assaults, including kicks, punches, and strikes with various objects, causing significant harm to both the mother and unborn child. Public spectacle. Lynching was often a public event designed to instill fear and assert white dominance. Crowds would gather to witness the violence, including women and children, further perpetuating a culture of racial terror. Mutilation. In some cases, lynching victims, including pregnant women, were mutilated. This could involve dismemberment, burning, or other forms of desecration, adding to the barbarity of the act. There is an account of a woman named Mary Turner who was lynched after she spoke publicly about the lynching of her husband that happened a day prior. The mob bound her feet, hanged her from a tree with her head facing down, threw gasoline on her, and burned the clothes off her body. Mrs. Turner was still alive when the mob took a large butcher's knife to her abdomen, cutting the unborn baby from her body. When the baby fell from Mary Turner, a member of the mob crushed the crying baby's head with his foot. The mob then riddled Mrs. Turner's body with hundreds of bullets, killing her. These acts of violence were intended to dehumanize, terrorize, and oppress the victims and the broader Black community. The brutality inflicted upon Black pregnant women during lynchings was a manifestation of the deep-seated racism and systemic violence that characterized the era. A sinister message. The lynching of Black pregnant women was not merely an act of violence, It was a deliberate message of subjugation and control. Perpetrators sought to instill fear and reinforce a distorted narrative of racial superiority. By targeting these women, they attacked the very core of their communities, attempting to dismantle the resilience and strength that sustained generations. The forgotten voices. History has conveniently overlooked the stories of these victims, silencing their voices and denying them justice. Yet, their memory lingers, haunting the fabric of our society. It is our duty to listen, to bear witness to their suffering, and to ensure that their names are etched into the collective consciousness. A call for remembrance and reckoning. We cannot rewrite history, but we can confront it with unwavering resolve. We must acknowledge the pain and trauma inflicted upon Black pregnant women and their families. It is through this acknowledgement that we can begin the journey toward healing, reconciliation, and justice. Education and empathy. To create lasting change, we must educate ourselves and future generations about this dark chapter in our past. We must foster empathy, standing alongside those whose lives were marred by such heinous acts. Through education, we can challenge the systems that perpetuate racism, ensuring that the sins of the past do not haunt our present or dictate our future. Conclusion. In the depths of America's history lies an uncomfortable truth, a truth that demands recognition, reflection, and redemption. The lynching of Black pregnant women symbolizes the depths to which humanity can sink, but it also illuminates the indomitable spirit and resilience of those who have suffered. It is a painful reminder of the work that remains to be done to build a more just and equitable society. Let this essay serve as a clarion call, resonating with the hearts and minds of all who read it. May it ignite a collective awakening, an unwavering commitment to confront the past, and a determination to forge a future that rejects the horrors of yesterday. Together, we can ensure that the memory of those Black pregnant women lives on, forever etched in the tapestry of our nation.